Hello there and welcome to a new day. This is AM Prime or WESN Content's Capital. It's Friday, or as I like to say, Friday. Welcome to this edition of the program. As we continue our conversations leading up to Budget 2023-2024, due to be read on October 2nd, my first guest is a senior associate at M. Hamel-Smith and Company. He also specializes in tax. He's a very much so bright young individual, and I stress on that because if you see him just now, you realize, listen, this really is a young individual, and he's actually taken the time to speak to us about tax this morning, but about recent tax incentives over the last few years as put in place by the government. It's actually very much prudent of him to do such, reminding us of what has been done, and so gives us a better understanding of possibly what to expect when the budget is read on October 2nd. So this morning I'm joined by Mr. Miguel Vasquez, and he's with us via Zoom. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me as well.
Well, Mr. Vasquez, I much appreciate the time you took to actually author this column. And you've highlighted different tax incentives in different areas, whether it be in energy, whether it be in technology, manufacturing, even renewable energy. But let's just start off with a general conversation of some of the incentives we've seen put into effect by the current government over the last few years.
Yeah, sure, no problem at all. In terms of an overview, well, I think the starting point for any discussion regarding the tax incentives is to really understand the underlying rationale for a tax incentive to begin with. Most times the starting point would be that, company would like to deduct from its tax base any expense that it incurred in generating any, its revenue or its profits. Stemming from that, expenses of a capital nature are ordinarily not deductible. So in order to circumvent that general or common law position, statutes are introduced by Parliament, and legislative provisions are introduced in order to allow for certain capital expenditure to be either allowed or to be deducted from the tax base, or to even provision for even further incentives, such as, for example, 150% allowance. What that means is you are enabled to deduct more expenses that you would have actually incurred in arriving at your tax base. Mm-hmm. So if you look at it from a general perspective, what the government has done, particularly in the past 3 years following at the onset of COVID to now, we see a lot of incentives being introduced from the perspective of the digitization or the digital economy. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's really to try and develop that aspect, especially having regard to the fact that for so long we've had to work from home, but also to appreciate that going further, the climate has changed. That does not mean we intend to go back to, a pre-COVID position where we don't understand that digitization of the economy is critical, and it is here, and the rest of the world has moved on. And we also need to get on board and to encourage our persons, our businesses, our young people to really jump on board as well before we get left behind.
Certainly, and there's also been a lot of focus on small and medium business enterprises over the last few years, particularly during the COVID-19 lockdown periods. Following the lifting of such restrictions, there's also been great focus on SMEs and their role in the economy. What are some of the incentives focused on SMEs in regard to, for example, corporation tax or even allowances that the government has provided?
Yep, sure, no problem. So if you look at it from two perspectives, one, that SMEs are specifically targeted, but also they fall within the bracket of corporations generally. So many of the allowances that are introduced for companies also extend to small and medium enterprises as well. So the starting point would be from the SMEs perspective is, as you can see, it is when the SME is listed, there is a two forms of tax exemption. First being for the first 5 years of listing on the TNT Stock Exchange, and then subsequently 5 years after after that initial 5 year period. In terms of what those exemptions are, it's a reduction of the tax rate. So it would be 0% for business levy, green fund levy, as well as corporation tax for the first 5 years after listing on the TNT Stock Exchange. And for the second 5 years, it would be a reduction by 50%. So what that means is that if in 5 years the government decides to change the actual underlying corporation tax rate, whatever that underlying corporation tax rate would be, the SMEs will be entitled to 50% of that rate. As it stands right now, it's 30% for SMEs, and all corporations actually, save for financial institutions, petroleum companies. So as it stands right now, it'll be 15% for the second 5 years. But in addition to that, I mean, we have the general, incentives that are available for all corporations, not just at SMEs. So, I mean, I'm happy to go into that if you would like.
Of course, yes, please do.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, particularly over the past few years, and aimed at digitalization, for example, companies whose core business activities are digitization and technology solutions, they're entitled to be taxed half of the corporation tax rate for the first 100,000 of chargeable income for last income year, and for the first 200,000 for this particular income year. And what that means is that, say for example, companies' chargeable profits is 500,000 in 2022, then for the first 100,000 of that 300,000, it will be subject to the half of the corporation tax rate, which would be 15%. For this income year, it would be the first 200,000 that would be subject to the 15% corporation tax rate. They've also introduced a few other as well. Say, for example, companies engaged in research and development, they're entitled to a capital allowance of 40% on expenditure incurred in research and development. And why that's important is very oftentimes expenses would be incurred an venture may fail, for example, or if it's incurred in purchasing, as I said, capital, assets or things of a capital nature, then ordinarily those expenses are not allowable. So you can, expend a significant amount of expenses in certain things, and ultimately you can't claim that back. This allowance allows you to claim, 40% of those expenses, of course, up to a maximum of $3 million. If we look at tech startups, new tech companies, going to the real digitalization of the economy, they are entitled to something called a super allowance, which means, which I will touch on, very briefly earlier, that if you incur, for example, $5 in expenses, our 150% allowance allows you to recover $7.50, which is more than you actually paid. And that's why it's a 150% allowance. So that also has been provided for companies and new startups. Of course, there are certain conditions and certain of these allowances. For example, the company must have been incorporated within 3 years from January 1st, 2020. So in a sense, we're looking at certain exemptions or allowances that may be falling within an expiration period. It is the hope within the business community, as well as to ensure sustainability, that certain of these allowances or the sunset provision is extended. Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Vasquez, I don't know if there was something.
Oh, no, sorry, you can go ahead. We can go on and on.
No, but that's actually good. In fact, it makes my job easier, because, again, appreciative going through your column. It's absolutely packed with a lot of information, and I'm glad that you focused on tech startups as well. But before I go any further beyond the conversation of what's taking place generally, I just wanted to highlight something in regards to special economic zones. The Special Economic Zone Act of 2022. Could you kindly just explain further in detail the provisions made within that act?
Absolutely. I guess it's a a useful segue as well to mention that the Special Economic Zones Act has not been fully proclaimed yet. So it's partially proclaimed, which means it's not fully enforced yet. They're just stating provisions within the legislation that has been proclaimed. What this legislation aims to do is twofold in a sense. As you may know, there is a previous regime that is intended to replace called the Free Zones Act. Under the Free Zones Act, we, a lot of research, even the EU bodies have done examination on this particular legislation to realize a lot of the shortcomings, including from a customs perspective, goods being imported into the jurisdiction which would have gone uninvestigated, but also, and more importantly, is that it ring fences a type of industry to preferential tax treatment. That regime is one of the reasons we've been on the EU blacklist for some time, and listed as a preferential tax regime jurisdiction. So the SEC legislation, Special Economic Zones legislation is one of the pillars in which we are hoping to get out of the EU blacklist. All right. If we can go into more into the legislation itself, so it operates in a number of spheres. So the starting point, I think, would be is that there are three types of licenses that are available under the legislation. There's an operator license, a special economic zone license, and a single economic zone license. So based on the type of license that is issued, there are certain responsibilities, there are certain duties, there are certain compliance requirements for each particular license. And how that is sort of married into the overall regime is that you look at a particular geographic area within which would be granted called a special economic zone. So say, for example, you have, I guess we can look at the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate. That's recently been, I believe it's been approved as a SEZ. And what that means is that just within that geographic zone, licensees can operate and be entitled to certain, tax allowances, stamp duty exemptions, and even certain preferential treatment in terms of the ease of doing business, which has taken a significant hit in the past, I would say, 8 years.
Now, in that regard, do the benefits associated with a special economic zone depend on the type of license that is issued? And what I'm asking specifically is, are there various types of licenses that are issued under the SEZ Act?
Yes, so there's the operator license, there's the special economic zone license, and the single enterprise zone license. All right, so for example, so the second and third licenses are really the licenses that many businesses would be aiming to be registered as. The operator license is really someone who has oversight of the entire geographical region to, sort in some sense to avoid the equivalent of a free zone company having to, have oversight of that particular geographic zone. So if you look at a SEZ licensee or a single economic zone licensee operating, they'll be, entitled to certain reliefs, credits, zero-rated VAT on goods supplied and services provided, especially by non-residents into the zone, exemptions from custom duties on the importation of certain approved goods, spare parts, raw materials, stock and trade, and other articles for use within that particular special economic zone. There are also certain things such as reduced corporation tax rate, which can be distinguished under the free zone legislation, which intended to have not just a reduced corporate tax rate, but an exemption from corporation tax altogether.
Now, moving forward now, and speaking about specialty areas, we've heard the conversations about renewable energy and Trinidad and Tobago moving in that direction. Well, the Caribbean actually, not just TNT, but TNT's position is we are also going to exploit any natural resources, and more specifically energy, for as long as they exist and as long as they're marketable, what are some of the incentives for the energy industry and by extension, separately, the renewable energy industry?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we could just take it by the, renewable energy incentives first, it's been kind of a meandering slope in a sense. So if we look at the exemptions for motor vehicles, for example, so you can look at hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, or even CNG vehicles. Over the years, we've had exemptions on value-added tax, motor vehicle tax, as well as custom duties on these vehicles. It started off being, exemptions for both commercial and private use vehicles. And I believe it was 4 years the vehicle had to be 4 years used, if they're not new, in order to be granted these exemptions. Since then to now, the exemptions and have been reduced, so it's now only for private vehicles that new private vehicles that are imported, as well as used private vehicles that are 2 years from the date of manufacture. Mm-hmm. All right, so those vehicles get exemptions on value-added tax, custom duties, and motor vehicles tax as well. So you ought to see when you look at the price of motor vehicles that are new, because all of vehicles are imported, of course, they should be lower than what an equivalent fully gas-operated vehicle would be. In terms of the renewable energy for companies and stepping away from transportation, we have a wear and tear allowance of 150% in respect of expenditure incurred on the acquisition of plant, machinery, parts, and materials for use in the manufacture and acquisition of solar water heaters, wind turbines, equipment, solar photovoltaic systems, as well as supporting equipment. There's also 150% allowance in respect of expenditure incurred in carrying out an audit for the design and installation of energy-saving systems. And that really goes back to the fact that sometimes when you have an expense of a capital nature or expense that would not necessarily be wholly and exclusively incurred in producing income, you may not be able to, more likely than not, you would not be able to claim that as a deduction. Mm-hmm. But having this specific allowance allows you to claim that as a deduction.
And just to verify, that's an allowance for any company that wants to shift across to renewable energy and sources of renewable energy. There is a 75% allowance for the
Correct.
Audit, for the design, I suppose, and build of such.
That's correct.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, you can go ahead. That's fine.
Because I'm shifting across now to the actual energy industry, not the renewable energy industry. But again, there's a lot of conversations around it. And specifically with carbon capture, what are the allowances, if any at all?
Yeah, so in terms of actual energy, I mean, we have seen some, but I mean, based on how the energy sector is or has been lately, I wouldn't say there's a significant amount of it. But for example, there's always been a tax credit or investment tax credit. It's just that the percentage has increased now, so it's now a 50% increase of a tax credit to offset cost of investment in carbon capture and storage and enhance oil recovery for companies who have invested in this activity. Mm-hmm. The expenditure, of course, must be incurred in technology which prevents or removes carbon emissions from the atmosphere and stores the captured carbon emissions for reuse in manufacture, or stores the captured carbon emissions underground or otherwise. That's in relation to the carbon capture and storage. But in relation to enhanced oil recovery, it's increased recovery of crude oil from a reservoir by using various methods such as steam, water flooding, or gas injection into an existing oil well.
And this is specific, though, that I think, as you mentioned, it has to be technology that actually captures and stores carbon emissions rather than emissions from entering the atmosphere. It's specific to that.
That's correct. That's correct.
And Mr. Vasquez, as we now we'll get to the last part of the conversation. Again, another industry which has been spoken quite a lot in the last few years is more so manufacturing, particularly the role manufacturing is now playing, and how manufacturing, well the profits or the contribution towards GDP from the manufacturing sector has really propped TNT. That being said, clearly this would an area of which the government will continue to focus on. But in recent times, they have made certain allowances and provisions. What are such for manufacturing and construction?
Sure. So I think two recent one really comes to mind. There's a one-time credit for manufacturing companies that invest in new machinery, production lines, or new equipment up to a maximum of $50,000. Of course, the costs incurred by manufacturing companies in this sector, the costs are significantly more. So to the extent this credit would be as useful or as beneficial to them, remains to be seen. But secondly, there's also an entitlement to reduction in corporation tax, namely from 30% to 25% when the first $100,000 that is expended on investment in projects relating to information technology, digitization, and technology development. Of course, all with the aim for advancing growth in the manufacturing industry.
Mm-hmm. And that's expenditure on new technologies, allowances for expenditure on new technology.
That's correct. That's correct.
Specific. Well, Mr. Vasquez, I must say thank you very much once more for the conversation this morning and for educating us a bit more. Yes, there would be many who are aware of this, but it's always good to, I suppose, jog the memory of what has transpired in the past and possibly what is to come on October 2nd. So I look forward to future conversations, but until then, keep us, and once more, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
Thank you very much, sir. And that was Mr. Miguel Vasquez joining me this morning on AM Prime. He took the time to explain specifically in whether it be specialty industries here in TNT, or whether it be just general tax incentives and allowances of which the government has provided for within recent times. And like I said, it's quite amazing that we're able to have this conversation, especially knowing that a budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 is right around the corner. Such conversations and the actions by Mr. Vasquez in authoring the column are very much crucial for an understanding, and I must say I appreciate that very much. So let's take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, we'll welcome another individual to the set to speak about perspectives of Trinidad and Tobago, more so how growing up in TNT versus what you're experiencing now, how that has changed one's viewpoint. We'll get into that conversation after this.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokaram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen
screen,
Because it's silent.
it's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmall, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shag brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continue to serve you with pride. First Citizen celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for making the time to join us this morning. I say us because I am now privileged to welcome to AM Prime a face of which you're familiar with by now. She is our news anchor for WSN's News on the Hour. Miss Sarah Ali is in studio this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Keaton. Thank you for having me. It's
Well,
definitely a different platform to be on, but we'll see how it goes.
It certainly is. Yes, we will see how it goes, actually. And thank you very much for actually making the time to join us this morning, because I thought it was an interesting conversation that we were having off air.
Right.
And I thought it would be very good to bring it on air and expand it a bit. And that is, even from my position and now in your position, where every day you wake up and you're reading the news, and more so you're in a position where you're collating news, where you're having to actually verify stories at times, where you're even during the day doing a lot of research and keeping up to date with what's taking place. And to a certain extent, it takes away a lot of that sweetness associated with TNT. There's good news, but there's also a lot of bad news. And that's from my perspective. But how has being exposed to all that you are, especially as you're growing and budding in this particular field, how has that changed your perspective of Trinidad and Tobago?
Prior to working at WESN, I never used to really follow up on the news. So it has widened my perspective and my knowledge as well. And just with the crime rates and everything that's going on, me personally and a lot of young people, they tend to, they don't want to be in Trinidad anymore. I personally can't see a life in Trinidad for me.
And you know what, nobody can blame you for that, because I love my country, I love my nation. But there are times when I myself think the same thing, that there is not much of a future here. And then I'm brought back to the sense that possibly it's us who are the ones that have to try and push with some level of change for some hope for all. But even as you're saying that it's affected you in the sense that TNT is losing its sweetness.
I agree, yes.
Yeah. In that sense too, even simple little things like going for lunch, sometimes by yourself, or even traveling to work. I mean, how is it even every morning when you wake up and you're on your journeys to come to work? Is that always at the back of your mind?
It can be very challenging at times, because when you have to stop a taxi, you don't know who you're stopping. And God forbid, you could get into the wrong car and the worst can happen to you. But, I ensure to just say a prayer and hopefully, I get into the correct car. But I do try to take public transport, because it's in a way kind of safe,
Do you think that young people in Trinidad and Tobago give up too easily? Because the first thing is, yes, I don't want to live here anymore because I don't see a life here. Let me go to another country. Things may not necessarily be as better off. It may be more expensive, but I could probably have a better chance of surviving there. You think young people just give up too easily?
I agree. I think that the the mindset of a lot of people, they don't want to work hard and just make that extra effort to get what they want. Like, for example, in my situation, I have to come from South to go to work in Portersby. And a lot of people, they'd be like, nah, I don't want to go there too far, to wake up too early, or whatever. But behind all of that, it is a sacrifice to where to your career or wherever, you'd like to be.
So what drives you? Because you said it is a sacrifice. But what drives you, given all the complications associated, not only with your job, but also with just what is TNT becoming or what it has become?
Personally, number one, the thing that drives me is I need to make my parents proud, especially my mom and dad. Secondly, just to be a difference. Yes, I did say that, I'd like to go away and all of that. But I would like to leave something in Trinidad before I leave. So they could say, yes, that's Sarah Ali. She did this and she did that. And one of the things that I'd like to see is that commuting to work, I see a lot of women struggling with children. So, I just plan to maybe have an organization for them, just something to do with transport or just helping them out. Right now, I'm not in a position to have an organization. But, that's what I want to do. I would like to help women and children, young girls in the commuting, traveling.
Well, that's commendable. But before we get to that, there are two things that you said there. First of all, you do plan on leaving Trinidad. Is that the case? Is that part of your plans long term?
Yes. I would like to leave Trinidad. But I don't know if I'd like to live in that particular country permanently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's probably to just get some experience outside of Trinidad.
Yeah, just to build a portfolio, all of that.
Well, that's fine. But you said something which clicked in my mind, which it's always very difficult to analyze. You said, first of all, to make your parents proud, which again, every young person wants to make their parents proud for all the sacrifices that their parents made. But there is a difference between wanting to make your parents proud and living your life for them, and living your life for their approval.
Yeah.
What is the difference? And in the case, are you living your life for your parents?
They brought me up, they instilled values in me, and it's up to me to take those values into how I live my daily life, into the decisions I make. But the respect and all of that, I wouldn't say I'm living for my parents, but I do take my parents into consideration, like the values that they taught me.
But if you don't get approval from your parents in whatever it is you're doing or the life that you're living, how does that affect you in the sense? Will you still go out and do it? Do you think 3 times, 4 times about it? I mean, is the approval of your parents something that is absolutely key, like something that is necessary in order for you to basically live your life?
No, I don't agree, because sometimes what they want for you may not be the best thing, and you just have to go with what your mind tells you, and most importantly, pray to God.
Now, there is a fine line there as well, because a lot of folks will say your parents knows what's best for you, especially in these times. There are a lot of people who will champion youth have become more liberal in thinking, more liberal minded. Yes. People are thinking for themselves, they're developing their own theories, they're also developing their own ways of thinking and perspectives. A lot of people will champion that, but there are those who are saying, these youths don't know anything. And look at what the liberal minds have allowed them to think. They're thinking things all over the place. They would even go as far as to say their thoughts are completely wrong and off. And there's that fine line as well. How does one navigate that fine line?
It could be, very challenging at times. But it's honestly up to the individual. Like, you would know. You would know if it's right, if it's wrong.
But your future in Trinidad, and we're getting a bit deep here because it's a conversation also that I thought, and I think we spoke about this off as well, and the conversation surrounding young people and even getting married now. And I think a couple of things that I think we both agree on, that young people, younger than you and I, who are getting married, and it's confusing because, one, you would think that young people now, especially with the mindset, is, we want to live our life first, we want to make strides in our career, we this is what we want to achieve, then marriage is an afterthought. I mean, long ago, generations gone, the thought was, no, you need to get married, and in some instances, when you get married, it's the husband that works, the woman stays home and looks after the kids, looks after the house, and all that changing more or less has expired. But then you're seeing a bit of a shift now. People younger than us are getting married, and it's a bit confusing. Is that also something that is a challenge to grapple with, whether it be what you want to achieve, the household in terms of marriage, or even just how society is trending? Does that impact upon your thinking every day? And when I say your thinking, I don't mean you specifically, but just generally, because you would speak in social circles as well.
Right, yeah. Right, so the getting married at a young age, a lot of people tend to do it because, one, they may have no choice. Like, they come from a broken household, and that person, you see, they providing, you could get a shelter and all of that. So that would be a reason. The second reason is that, maybe because the both of them willingly want to get married, and they do see a future with one another. So, they get married, they grow together, they build themselves together. So there are two parts about it that I heard, like people get married just because they get a piece of land from their parents or they get things, right?
So incentives towards marriage, that's what you're saying. But it's a broken household, any justifiable reason or excuse to get married at a young age. Because again, you're right, it's really up to the individual and an individual's background and their story. But isn't that in a sense suggesting that people are being forced into marriage?
Yeah, that is true. But you, right, you are in a vulnerable position and you have nowhere else to go. And this woman, she says, we could get married, we could build together, you could come and live with me, I'll give you everything. What will you do?
What I do,
yeah.
I think long and hard about it, and I'll tell you why. One, I'm not going to force myself in a position where just purely out of survival, I'm going to get into a relationship or I'm going to get married. Simply out of survival. Because what happens when I'm able to stand on my 2 feet? Would I think of that person in the same way? Would I love that person in the same way? Or would I just love them for what they could provide for me when I'm at my lowest or weakest point? You know? And then there's also another side to it, of which men do not necessarily like to speak about, and that is their ego.
I agree.
Yeah. And no, I'll be honest with you, and I'm probably going to get a lot of boos this morning from all of the guys, but we have to be open and honest with each other, and that is, a guy's way of thinking is that he has to be the breadwinner. In order for him to be the man of the house, he has to be the one making the money, he has to be the one paying the bills, right? And that is the way of thinking. And I've spoken to a lot of couples who challenged that. I've spoken to a lot of couples also, not only challenging, but living it, where the woman is now the one who's pursuing her career, and the man is the homemaker. And they're shifting tides as well in that sense. But ego still remains a big part of that conundrum.
I agree. But how would you feel if
I like how this interview has changed. That's fine, go ahead.
The woman was the breadwinner and you just, had to stay at home, do the house chores and all that.
How would I feel about that? I don't know. Because...
But would you be okay with it?
If I would be okay with this, again, my honest answer to you is, I don't necessarily know. And again, I may be susceptible to that very same thing I spoke about, which is ego. But somebody pointed it out in a conversation again previously, and that is, sometimes you don't have to think too hard about it. There are instances where women will be at a low point in their life, as you've just mentioned, and it's really sometimes the men who would take charge and help a situation and say, you know what, don't worry, we look after you, I look after you. That ties back into your suggestion that maybe it's a broken household, or it could just be I'm at a low point in my life. Maybe I've just lost my job, or whatever the case may be, right? The men may have to take charge. And it's a similar thing when you swap roles.
Yeah.
Maybe it is okay if you're in a relationship where the guy has to stay at home and is the homemaker, and the woman is the sole breadwinner. Maybe it is okay. But again, a crucial part of this conversation is ego. It's a huge thing. One, a guy's willing to accept that, as you just asked. But two, a woman also willing to play that role in any relationship. A woman choosing to take basically that position of being the one who brings in brings home the money, or as they say, the bacon or the bread, however you like to put it.
Yeah, but then at the same time, in a situation like that, obviously I don't think with an ego, the guy would be okay just sitting at home. He obviously have to be looking for jobs, just being proactive, even though you are at home,
Yes and no, because Sarah, let's face it, there are days when either of us, and I know I could speak on your behalf at this point, where we just want to sit home and do nothing.
Yeah.
You just want to stay home and do nothing, right? And there's some days, sometimes when you just want to do it consecutively. I just don't care. I want to stay home and do nothing. I want to have no worries and no stress, right? Okay, yeah, I have to cook food, and maybe I have to do some chores, but still I'm home. And then there are some days as well where you're just itching to get things done. Sometimes being at home for extended periods could be your motivation to get up and find a job. I can't wait to go back out to work. I can't wait to do this. So it's all dependent as well upon the situation. I know for me personally, Sarah, after some time, I can't stay at home. I can't. I was on vacation for 2 weeks in the month of June. And by the latter half of the second week, I couldn't wait to come back out to work. And then when Sunday hit, I was like, no, I don't want to go.
Yeah, I think that's normal. That's just everyone. I mean, I would feel the same way too.
Yeah, but this conversation surrounding marriage as well, do you think now in the times that we're living in, two young people will get married because it's just purely out of survival, beyond one individual coming from a broken background or one individual that's fallen on hard times, whatever the case may be? You think two incomes are better than one, and that's probably why some people are getting married?
That is a very good point, actually. Yeah, I really think so, because now we live in a time that we need to survive. You know, things are hard, groceries are expensive, we have rent to pay and all of those things. So that definitely could be a reason. Two incomes are better than one.
And you think families are still, where they can, very much supportive of young couples? Because we can't speak to everybody. Again, everybody's story is different. But getting married at such a young age, wanting to have children, and that's, by the way, that's another topic that we've just raised. And I know we're running out of time, but have to raise it quickly. People are asking all the time. I've met people all the time, when you're getting married, right? People watching the television see, I see her on your finger all the time. What's going on there? I'm like, it's the wrong hand. You know, look properly, it's the wrong hand. And then they're like, so what about children? You know? And my thinking is, and tell me if this is selfish thinking, it is cruel to bring a child into the world now. That's my perspective. And I don't know if you think the same way, or if...
I do think the same way, just because of the crime and all of the ugly things that is going on in Trinidad. But I personally do want to get married and do want to have children and just do want to have that life. I mean, I will do my best to protect them and to do the best that I can, you know. But I mean, I do agree it's cruel, but I would like to have children.
So let me flip it for a moment with the time that we have. Is it cruel to bring a child into this world right now? Is it cruel to bring a child or raise a child in Trinidad and Tobago right now? Because bear in mind, there's still a lot of positives about Trinidad, which we haven't really touched on. There's still a lot. Or is it cruel generally in any other country? Like, would somebody quicker have a child if they were living, for example, in Canada? Would that decision be a lot easier if they were living in Canada as compared to TNT, just as an example?
Yes, that's a great question, actually. In Trinidad right now, I mean, the situation could get better, and, you know, we could live in a harmonious, good country. But right now, it's very, very difficult to have a child, to care for that child from everything else.
From raising a child, you know, it's a responsibility. People take a look at it as it's only an expense. And yes, it is an expense. It's a responsibility. You have children who are having children. That is bothering me a lot. But at the same time, people who are not mature enough to even look after themselves are raising children or having children. But there are lots of positives to it as well, of which, unfortunately, right now, we don't have time to get into, because we got to go and see your face on a different platform. Yes, we're going to take a break here, and when we return, well, Sarah's staying with me this morning, so she'll be part of the next interview as well. We'll be right back after this.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. The government unveils $1 billion water supply infrastructure upgrade. Opposition leader calls for removal of online purchase tax to support small and medium businesses. Trinidadian sidewalk jerk chicken vendor fatally shot in New York City. Regionally, U.S. offers close to 500,000 Venezuelans legal status. Now for the details. The government has launched a $1 billion revitalization project aimed at enhancing the water supply infrastructure of the Water and Sewerage Authority. This undertaking is funded through a U.S. $315 million conditional credit line from the Inter-American Development Bank in conjunction with the Public Sector Investment Program. According to the IDB's official website, the water rehabilitation program is projected to directly impact an estimated 1,025,000 residents living in over 310,000 households. Opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar has appealed to the government to consider abolishing the 7% online purchase tax, aiming to alleviate the financial strain faced by small and medium-sized enterprises. In a released statement, Persad-Bissessar expressed her concerns, noting that this tax has exacerbated the financial challenges experienced by businesses. She stated, the introduction of this tax has added to the economic pressures on emerging entrepreneurs established by SMEs and industrious citizens, all while contradicting the government's approach to addressing the foreign exchange crisis. Persad-Bissessar's comments come in response to Finance Minister Colum Imbe's recent remarks about the surge in online shopping over recent years. Tragedy struck in Harlem, New York City, as a 65-year-old Trinidadian national, Anthony Brooks, fell victim to a senseless act of violence. Known for his sidewalk jerk chicken venture, Brooks met an untimely demise. Reports indicate that Brooks was shot in the chest during a confrontation with an assailant who attempted to steal his backpack in what appears to be a field robbery attempt on Wednesday morning. Brooks succumbed to his injuries shortly after being rushed to Harlem Hospital. Brooks was renowned for his culinary skills, specializing in West Indian dishes, which he sold to those passing by. Internationally, Venezuelans seeking asylum in the U.S. who are already living in the country will be allowed to work legally under new rules announced by the Biden administration. About 472,000 people will be eligible for temporary protected status for a period of 18 months. It follows calls by Democrats to expand work access for newly arrived migrants. U.S. cities have been grappling with large numbers fleeing economic and political turmoil in Venezuela. People must have been living in the U.S. on or before the 31st of July to be eligible for temporary deportation relief and access to work permits under TPS. If granted, they will be allowed to work while they wait for an asylum determination to be made. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Sira Ali. Thanks for watching.
We exposed 5 strangers to KFC's delicious chicken to see if any time could be KFC time. And at the first bite, the party began. We repeated the experiment during the day, during business hours, on weekends, with sunshine, with rain. And it's confirmed. KFC's flavor makes anytime KFC time. KFC, it's finger licking good.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Welcome back to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Keaton Shaw joined by Miss Sarah Ali this morning. Sarah, welcome back.
Thank you.
And Sarah and I were joined this morning by our next guest, Dr. Catherine Minto-Bain. You've seen her before on the program. This morning we're speaking about Polycystic Ovary Syndrome, or PCOS Awareness Month. The theme this month is Empowered Patients, Better Outcomes. And what is the best way to empower anyone? Share with them knowledge and information, education that is. So Dr. Catherine Minto-Bain is here to do such this morning. Hello and welcome back to the program.
Good morning. It's lovely to be here. Everybody welcome. It's lovely to be here, and I'm so happy to be here to talk about something that's really important as well.
Well, Dr. Minto-Bain, we're very much pleased to be joined by you this morning. So the obvious question, as Sarah actually pointed out, is explaining what PCOS is and what causes PCOS.
Yes, and we're talking about it this morning because it's PCOS Awareness Month. So we want everybody to think about it, know about it, and there's somebody that you know that has PCOS, because PCOS is this really common hormone condition. What are hormones? Well, they're these chemical messengers in the blood. And in PCOS, we see that there's two hormones that kind of go haywire. One is your male type hormone androgen that women have, just like men do. And then the other hormone involved in PCOS is insulin, a hormone that takes care of sugar in our bloodstream. And these two hormones, they're really responsible for the symptoms that PCOS is. So PCOS is a group of symptoms caused by abnormalities or imbalances in these two hormones. And we think probably around about 1 in 7 girls and women have it. Maybe in Trinidad it's actually commoner, maybe it's around 1 in 6.
Dr. Minto-Bain, did you just say insulin, the hormone insulin, also causes, or is part of the cause of PCOS?
It's an integral part. So the testosterones, androgen type hormones, and the insulin type hormones, they're interlinked in the way they behave in the body, and PCOS causes imbalances in both of them, leading to the symptoms and these big variety of symptoms that women with PCOS get, because it affects all women differently.
Well, in that regard, as you're saying, it affects all women differently. In a previous interview that we had, I asked specifically whether or not ethnicity has anything to do, for example, with low sperm count. This morning we're speaking about PCOS. Does one's ethnic background also have any effects on PCOS? Like, are there any specifics in regards to ethnicity?
There really are, yes. And that's because we don't really know what the cause of PCOS is 100%, but PCOS is definitely impacted and partially caused by genes, your genetics, the things that your parents, mother, father, or both probably passed down to you. So when you are diagnosed with PCOS, part of the cause of it is probably in your genetics. And then there are other causes that come in as well. And so ethnicities, different ethnic groups, different people will definitely have higher incidence of PCOS. And we see it more commonly in East Indian populations, but it's more common in Afro-Caribbean populations as well. And then it clearly is that different groups of people seem to get clusters of symptoms. So the East Indian women, we tend to see a worse type of PCOS where their insulin is really not working well in their body. We call that insulin resistance. So it certainly clusters in families. It clusters in groups, it clusters in certain ethnicities for sure, yes.
Right, so my next question to Dr. Mintu Bain is, how is PCOS diagnosed, and what are some of the early symptoms that a girl could look out for?
Those are great questions, Sarah. And I think it's so important. How do we diagnose it? Well, we diagnose it much better these days. And I would say the number one problem we deal with, that I deal with as a fertility doctor in Trinidad and Tobago, is overdiagnosis. So you've got to be careful not to tell people they have PCOS when actually they don't. So let's talk about diagnosis. And what are the symptoms? Let's actually maybe start there. So how would you know if you have PCOS? How does it affect your body? Well, it affects your body in kind of a couple of ways. One, for women, is their periods. So if you have an imbalance in insulin and androgens, you tend to find that your periods aren't regular once every month and dot on. And so you see this this pattern of periods that's not regular like that. And for some women, it's periods very, very close together. Some women, it's periods very, very spaced apart. And for a lot of women, it's, well, my period comes on every 4 to 8 weeks, and that's just the way it is. So this period irregularity is one symptom. And it's all to do with eggs growing. The cause of that is that these hormones interfere with the way eggs grow and come out. And that's why infertility, not getting pregnant, is a common symptom of PCOS. Not everybody has it, and maybe we come back and talk about that. So you can have PCOS and be fertile and get a baby, or you can have PCOS and struggle to get pregnant. So one way you see it is in your periods. The second way you see it is the symptoms you get are related to the imbalance in androgens in your body. So the other thing is, if your androgens, if there's too much free testosterone in your bloodstream, you tend to get the acnes, which are related to testosterone and androgens. So breakouts on the skin and body, unwanted hair in the body. So sometimes that's lower facial hair, hair on the body. So a lot of women get hair on the abdomen or hair around the nipples. So an increase in hair can just be normal in your family, but it can be a symptom of PCOS. Some women get slightly more of those androgen type symptoms. They can get a kind of male type balding, male type hair loss. Some women find that their genital area changes. They feel their clitoris is a bit bigger. You can get an enlargement of the clitoris or a deepening of the voice. And if those types of things are happening, you need to be careful. You haven't got the hidden cause PCOS, actually where you think you've got PCOS and it's caused by something else. So there's a variety of symptoms. And it's important to realize all women get it a bit differently. It's not the same for all women.
You just mentioned it's not the same for all women, but in your previous response as well, you mentioned, again, not focusing too much on insulin and its role, but you did say insulin-resistant PCOS, which leads me to ask, are there various forms or types of PCOS?
Yes, there are. And actually, I was taught as a medical student, it's PCOS one thing, and it's clearly not. And research recently and looking at populations and actually talking to women and listening to them, listening to people and finding out, has actually made us realize as a medical profession that we were wrong in the past. And actually it's probably about 4 types. So the commonest type I see in Trinidad and Tobago, and I think the commonest type worldwide generally seems to be the insulin-resistant one, where something is stopping your body responding to insulin, and over time that causes these PCOS symptoms and gives you PCOS. There are other types, though. It might not be PCOS at all, and that's why we call it hidden cause PCOS, where actually it's something like a thyroid disorder or an adrenal problem. There are other reasons for your hormones coming out of balance. Then we've got the classic type of PCOS. So there's this classic PCOS, and traditional PCOS, and it's not so much your insulin resistance. And then we have a slim type of PCOS as well. So there's a variety of different types, and we kind of cluster them. And then some doctors do it in a slightly different way. They say, okay, well, these women have the overweight problems. These women have the overweight metabolic syndrome hypertension problems. These women are the slim PCOS. They tend to have more ovulation and egg issues. These women have this type of PCOS. So you can divide it up in different ways.
Right. So when someone is diagnosed with PCOS and the specific type they have, what's next? Like, do the doctor immediately put them on birth control, or they have like other alternative medicine that they could take?
So it's not one treatment for everybody. And maybe we go back to diagnosis, how do you diagnose it properly? Because that's the key, diagnosing it properly and then listening to the person in front of you, what's bothering them. Because what's bothering them is then what you work on and the treatment options that you give. And there are lots of different treatment options. And you don't actually need to have a treatment necessarily, but you really, with PCOS, the key to it is understanding that I really have it and then looking at your risks. Because a big part of PCOS these days is what are your future risks and how do we reduce that? So women with insulin resistance are more at risk of becoming type 2 diabetics, getting diabetes. And there's a big amount of work a person can do to reduce that risk. And then some women with PCOS will have more of the lipid problems. Their lipids are out of balance, and that puts them at risk for cardiovascular disease, things like strokes and heart attacks later on. And there's a lot of work you can do in your 20s, 30s, and 40s to reduce that risk. You're looking for high blood pressure and overweight and all of the things that you can work on to change. So prevention is a big part of PCOS. And then what's your problem? Are you trying to have a baby? Okay, let's work on your eggs growing. There's some simple fertility tablets for that. But lifestyle as well. Lifestyle can work really well. Weight loss and exercise and eating the right types of diet are good. If it's hair, really it's the hair on your body that's really bothering you. Okay, there's some creams that you can use, electrolysis, laser, birth control pill can work really well for that because it brings down your androgens. If it's your periods, birth control pill is fabulous. Birth control pill has so many positive effects that can work really well, but you can also just take a tablet like Provera that brings on a period. And again, prevention. You must be having a period at least 4 times a year, once a quarter, to keep your womb healthy. And if you go years and years without periods, you're raising your risk of cancer of the womb later. So seeing a doctor and getting onto some treatment for your periods, it's different for everyone. Do you need contraception? Do you not? Do you like tablets? Do you not? Do you have other risks? You can even have a hormone coil, like a Mirena, put inside the womb to keep you healthy there. So lots of options. And then sometimes you need surgery. Now, PCOS can't be cured with surgery, but it's very helpful if tablets haven't worked for your eggs. So lots of treatment options. You can see there's so many things, and it really comes down to what are we trying to help this woman achieve? What's bothering her, and how do I keep her safe?
Are there issues, Dr. Minto, being associated with PCOS going undiagnosed? Part of that problem as well is the conversation that we're having. People do not like to speak openly, and not even a matter of speaking openly. They simply just don't want to visit the doctor for that very reason. So is that also a major part of the problem with instances of PCOS going undiagnosed?
I think it is. But we also have this overdiagnosis. It's a strange situation. So I think particularly for some young women, but for any woman, if you're dealing with facial hair and acne and being overweight, society judges you badly. There's a lot of stigma about that. And I think for a lot of people, it's hard to come to the doctor and ask for help because a lot of times you're made to feel like it's your fault. Even a lot of women feel bad to ask. It's embarrassing to go to the doctor, and then you have some doctors that aren't up to date and they don't help you, and you feel even worse. And it's difficult to talk about periods and wanting to get pregnant. There's so much stigma around those things. And who wants to go to the doctor? At the end of the day, I'm not good at going to the doctor, and it's difficult to go to a doctor and ask for help, particularly when it's something intimate and difficult. And it's why it's so great to get these conversations going. Because I think if people realize, oh no, hang on a second, this is a medical condition. There are doctors who know how to help me, and there are so many good treatments. And I mean, we haven't even talked about the mental health aspects. depression and anxiety are much higher in women with PCOS. And it's not just the women with the outward signs of it that they get judged for. It's women with that you wouldn't see that have PCOS. The slim PCOS women have it just as much. There's a huge range of aspects of this medical condition that can be treated. So yes, there's a huge amount of stigma and difficulty talking about these things. It's great to talk more, and that's what PCOS Awareness Month is all about.
Right. So, Dr. Minto, correct me if I'm wrong. If PCOS is left untreated, is there a possibility that the person could get cancer?
That's really rare, and I wouldn't say that you should be worried about cancer because you have PCOS. Let's say, number one, women with PCOS have a normal life expectancy. It's a chronic condition, but you do need to figure it out, learn about your body, and you need to have a diagnosis and a review by a doctor. So number one, you've got the correct diagnosis, and there are some long-term conditions to avoid. So like we said, if your periods are all over the place and actually if you're not having periods at all, you do put yourself at risk for uterine cancer later in life. While we're talking on TV, let's say there's one cancer for women that's really easy to prevent. It's not linked with PCOS, cervical cancer. So your doctor should also be doing things like pap smears for you. So every woman should be having pap smears because that's a cancer you can prevent, but it's not linked with PCOS. Then there's the diabetes. That's our modern day epidemic. And, women with PCOS, some of them are more at risk for it. You can see that in bloods and the measurements that you take for them. And there's lots of prevention there. So preventing diabetes, cardiovascular disease, strokes, strokes and heart attacks later, angina, cardiac problems. A lot of these things can be prevented by looking at women with PCOS and doing those preventative blood tests and preventative lifestyle measures and treatments. So yes, there are risks associated with it, and they're all things that you can change.
So Dr. Minto-Brain, going back to something that you mentioned earlier on, women can be diagnosed with PCOS, but they can still be fertile and get pregnant. There was a lot of thoughts that once I have PCOS, I cannot get pregnant. You've just actually really blown that out of the water already, that you can still get pregnant even if you're diagnosed with PCOS.
Absolutely. 7 out of 10 women with PCOS are going to struggle and need a bit of help, and that's because their eggs aren't growing or coming out properly. 3 out of 10, 30% of women with PCOS are going to get pregnant without a problem. So this idea that PCOS means I'm infertile forever is absolutely wrong. And if you don't want a baby, you should be on contraception. And I feel terrible for mothers that call me up and say, my daughter's just been diagnosed with PCOS. She's never going to have children. How do I tell her this is awful? She's crying. That's just not necessarily the case. And even if she does have some struggles, there are fabulous, fairly easy tablets and things that can be done. And then actually in that situation, lots and lots of teenage girls or girls in their very early 20s are told by an ultrasonographer, a person who does ultrasound scans, that they've seen that they've got PCO on their ovaries, polycystic ovaries, and therefore they've got PCOS. And that's not true. That's where our overdiagnosis comes from. So just because you have ovaries on an ultrasound that look a little bit polycystic does not mean you have polycystic ovaries. And actually, it's a normal phase that many ovaries go through. So you should be really careful diagnosing PCOS in a woman, in a girl, in the first 8 years after her periods have started. So from about 10 to 12 through to about 20, it's a normal phase that at least half of women's ovaries go through. So you don't diagnose on an ultrasound in a young woman. You have to have, yes, the ultrasound image, but you're looking at the symptoms, you're looking at other things. So it's not just ultrasound alone, and that's where our overdiagnosis comes from. And so that mother that called me up, it was just an ultrasound diagnosis, and her daughter had no other symptoms. So that's not even PCOS. You're devastated about something that actually she doesn't have.
Right. So how does that affect someone's mental health when they are diagnosed with PCOS? And how can we help them?
So whenever you diagnose someone with any medical condition, you need to provide lots of information. Information is key. Information is power. And that's exactly the case for PCOS. And you want to sit and talk with people and say, okay, well, these are the things I'm seeing. You've definitely got polycystic ovary syndrome. And here are your predictions for your risks for the future. You're lucky, you're not looking like the insulin-resistant type, but you've certainly got the higher androgens. What's in your family? Okay, you've got, you've had some women in your mother's side of your family that have had a stroke at 50 or a heart attack. We're seeing cardiovascular risk here. We're seeing that your lipids are very out of balance. You've got high cholesterol, high triglycerides. So let's start looking at medication for lipids, lifestyle changes. So it's really a matter of information, getting the right information, educating people, and giving them, empowering them. So, and then we also have counselors. You need to be very aware that a lot of people will be dealing with depression or anxiety, and talk therapy can really help with that. And a good therapist, a psychologist, a clinical psychologist can work out who might need some antidepressant treatment, see a psychiatrist and have some treatment there, and anxiety medication or the antidepressants can be hugely effective for women and really help them manage with things. And, PCOS changes at different times in your life as well. It comes, it goes, at different symptoms. So you want a good healthcare provider who knows you, that you start seeing regularly, not all the time, but, as much as you need to really keep you informed and empowered about how you manage your PCOS.
Dr. Catherine Minto-Bain, I want to thank you very much for joining Sarah and I on AM Prime this morning. It certainly is a pleasure once more to have you on the program, and thank you very much for the conversation. As you said, education and information is power, and having these conversations is also breaking a stigma associated with this, making people feel more comfortable and letting them know it's okay to speak about these things. In fact, it's a lot better and a lot healthier for you if we speak about these things rather than it just remaining untreated or undiagnosed. And as you mentioned as well, a big part of the problem is the overdiagnosis, so I'm glad that you raised that. Thank you very much, Dr. Minto-Bain, for your time.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you very much. Take care and all the best.
Take care.
Well, Sarah Ali, I think that was something that surprised a bit all of us, because even I didn't realize that even if you are diagnosed with PCOS, you can still get pregnant. As Dr. Minto-Bain said, 7 out of 10 women are going to struggle, right. But it doesn't mean that you cannot get pregnant.
She also widened my knowledge, because I didn't know that there was a specific type of PCOS, such as the low insulin.
Yeah, that was rather incredible, that there are different types of PCOS. Because as she said, in medical school, as a medical student, she was taught PCOS is just one thing. Now you realize that no, that's not the case. And even to mention insulin-resistant PCOS, that is incredible. So, ladies and gentlemen, as Sarah and I were educated this morning, we hope that also you feel a lot more empowered, as is the theme for PCOS Awareness Month 2023. Well, Sarah, as we're coming to the end of this morning's edition of AM Prime, thanks a lot for joining me.
You're welcome. Look forward to more.
Certainly looking forward to more. We'll have to expand on the conversations that we had this morning, deeming it as a perspective of a young Trini woman.
Definitely. We could have more guests as well.
We can have more guests, and we can have a lot more topics, ladies and gentlemen. But that's it. Thank you very much for joining Sarah and I this morning. It's Friday. Any plans for the weekend, by the way? Long weekend?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
When Sarah says she's not sure, Sarah's going to have a very wild and wacky weekend.
Well, I can't expose that.
And, I'm sorry. Anyway, don't worry, you'll see Sarah again next week. But ladies and gentlemen, a happy Republic Day to all here in TNT. And I think it's always a good time. Republic Day to me always serves as a reminder to reflect on who we are as a people, where we've come from, and where we're going. It's always been independence, it's been republic, but it's just something that reminds us that we should be doing that constantly. Sarah, have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye, guys. We'll see you on Tuesday at 6 a.m.
WESN
I'm Sean Michael Small, and we are WESN, the Content Capital.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continue to serve you with pride. First Citizen celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success.